This document created one of the first constitutional democracies in Asia. December 30th, 1906. The Shah signed it and then died 5 days later. But the constitution survived. Iran had an elected parliament before most of the Middle East, before the Russian Revolution, before the Ottoman constitution was restored. And then foreign powers destroyed it. Twice. Right now, Iranians are in the streets again. Same demands. Same pattern. And most people have no idea this fight started 120 years ago. If you ask online about the situation in Iran, you'll get two answers. One side says it's America's fault. The 1953 coup destroyed Iranian democracy. Everything since then is blowback. The other side says Iran is just culturally authoritarian. Nothing will change until they have their own enlightenment. So I did some digging, read some books about the topic, and then went to the primary sources. The truth is, both narratives are wrong, and they're wrong because they start in the wrong place. Everyone talks about 1953, the CIA coup, that's the story. But 1953 wasn't the beginning, it was a repetition. Let's start with 1906. The pattern starts there. Iranians built a constitutional democracy. Foreign powers found it inconvenient. These foreign powers allied with domestic authoritarians, and this led to the destruction of the constitutional government. 1953 was the second time that happened, not the first. And understanding the first time explains why the second time worked, and why the trauma runs so deep. December 1905, Tehran. The governor orders several sugar merchants beaten with the bastinado. That's a punishment where they whip the soles of your feet, because they refused to lower prices during an economic crisis. This seems like a small thing, a local dispute, but the sources reveal why it exploded. At this time, Iran was ruled by the Qajar dynasty, a royal family that had been in power since 1789. And the Qajars had a problem. They were broke. The revolution's long-term causes were rooted in the 19th century. Its short-term ones were triggered in 1904 and 1905 by an economic crisis brought about by government bankruptcy and spiraling inflation. For decades, the Qajars had been selling off pieces of Iran to foreign powers. Telegraph rights, banking rights, tobacco rights, oil rights. Each sale made the Shah more dependent on foreigners and less responsive to Iranians. So when the governor beat those merchants, he wasn't just enforcing price controls. He was defending a system that had sold the country piece by piece, while ordinary people starved. And that's when something unprecedented happened. The merchants took baths, sanctuary, first in mosques, then in the garden of the British Embassy. What makes this different from other Middle Eastern protests of that era is the direction it went. While in Egypt the British were dissolving parliaments, in Iran protesters were demanding one, and using British territory to do it. While in the Ottoman Empire the 1876 constitution had been granted from above by the Sultan, in Iran the constitution was being demanded from below, by merchants, intellectuals and dissident clerics working together. By August 1906, there were 14,000 people camped in the British legation garden, and what they demanded was a majlis, a parliament, and constitutional limits on the Shah's power. They won. On October 7th, 1906, the first majlis opened. On December 30th, the Shah signed the constitution. But this wasn't just a symbolic document, it was an operational manual for limiting royal power. The Majlis, elected representatives from across Iran, had to approve all budgets, treaties, loans and concessions. They could question ministers and force them to resign. They even controlled the court budget. Every mechanism the Qajars had used to sell off Iran was now under parliamentary control. The constitution was modelled on Belgium's, itself derived from British constitutional principles. Iran had created, on paper, a genuine constitutional monarchy. And the part that matters is this. It wasn't imposed by foreigners. It grew from internal pressure. Iranians themselves built this, which is exactly why foreign powers decided to destroy it. 1 year later, in 1907, Britain faced a problem that had nothing to do with Iran. Germany was rising, the Royal Navy needed allies, and the only power that could counterbalance Germany on land was Russia. But Britain and Russia had been rivals in Central Asia for decades. They'd been competing for influence in Persia, Afghanistan and Tibet, a rivalry the British called the Great Game. To get Russia as an ally against Germany, Britain needed to settle these Asian disputes. So, they signed the Anglo-Russian Convention. Britain got southern Iran as its sphere of influence. Russia got northern Iran, a neutral zone set between them. The critical detail is this. Iran was not consulted, but was simply informed of this arrangement after the treaty was signed in St. Petersburg. Iran wasn't at the table, they were on the menu. And this created a fundamental problem. The constitutional government that the Iranians had just built depended on controlling concessions, but Britain and Russia had just divided up the right to grant concessions between themselves. The constitution was designed to limit foreign influence. The Anglo-Russian Convention was designed to guarantee it. Something had to give. The new Shah, Mohammad Ali Shah, saw his opportunity. The constitution limited his power. Russia and Britain had just shown they didn't care about the constitution. So, in 1908, he moved to destroy it. At this time, the Shah's most reliable military force was the Cossack Brigade, an Iranian unit trained and commanded by Russian officers. Declaring martial law, the Shah appointed Colonel Lyakov, the Russian Cossack commander, to be military governor of Tehran. Lyakov sent his Cossacks to occupy the telegraph office and to bombard the Majlis building. Do you see what happened here? The Iranian parliament was bombarded by Iranian troops, commanded by a Russian officer appointed by an Iranian Shah with the tacit approval of Britain and Russia, who had just divided Iran between themselves. Foreign intervention and domestic authoritarianism working together. About 250 people died. The Majlis building was destroyed. The constitutional forces fought back. They retook Tehran. They restored the Majlis. But in 1911, Russia delivered an ultimatum. The Majlis had hired an American financial advisor named Morgan Shuster to fix Iranians' finances and reduce foreign influence. Russia demanded his dismissal, or they would occupy. The Majlis refused, so Russia occupied. The second Majlis was closed in December 1911, and Shuster's contract was abruptly terminated a few weeks later. With the closure of the Majlis, the first phase of the revolution effectively came to a stuttering halt. Iran's first democracy crushed, and this is what it established. Iranians built constitutional institutions. Foreign powers find those institutions inconvenient. Foreign powers ally with domestic authoritarians. Constitutional government is destroyed, and that trauma creates demand for the next constitutional movement. 1906 to 1911, that's the first turn of the cycle. For the next decades, Iran descended into chaos. World War I, foreign occupation, famine, a new dynasty, Reza Shah, who kept the constitutional form but gutted its substance. Then World War II. Britain and the Soviets occupied Iran again, forcing Reza Shah to abdicate. His son, Mohammad Reza, took the throne at 21. He was weak. The Majlis had space to act again, and the man who would lead the revival had been waiting. A 69-year-old aristocrat who had spent his entire political career fighting for a constitutional government. Back in 1919, when Britain tried to make Iran a protectorate through the Anglo-Persian Agreement, this man stood up in the Majlis and called the negotiators traitors to their faces. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh. I'll be honest, before I did research I had a simple picture of Mossadegh. National hero, overthrown by the CIA, a victim. The sources complicate that picture. Not in the way that you might think. The CIA still overthrew him, but understanding who he was explains both why he succeeded and why he failed. Mossadegh wasn't a young revolutionary. He'd been fighting for a constitutional government since 1906. He was an aristocrat, educated in Europe, wealthy, connected, and he had one absolute conviction: Iran must control its own resources. This wasn't a man who compromised with foreign powers. Mossadegh's conviction would be tested on one issue above all others: oil. Since 1901, British interests had controlled Iranian oil through something called the Darcy Concession. The deal worked like this. The concession gave British investors 60 years of exclusive rights to Iranian oil. Iran got 16% of net profits, and the British controlled how net profits were calculated. The British controlled all drilling, refining, and export operations. And by 1914, the British government owned 51% of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which would later become BP. But what I found interesting is that Iran's profit share wasn't even the core issue. British petroleum archives and Foreign Office records show that the core of the dispute was not profit sharing, but control. A March 1951 memo stated, "We can be flexible in profits, administration, or partnership, but not in the issue of control." The British would share money, they wouldn't share power. So when Mossadegh proposed nationalization, not confiscation, nationalization with compensation, it wasn't radical by global standards. Saudi Arabia had just negotiated a 50-50 profit split with Aramco. Venezuela had done the same. Iran was asking for what others had already achieved. But there was a difference. Saudi Arabia and Venezuela negotiated from within the system. Mossadegh wanted to change the system itself. On March 15, 1951, the Majlis voted to nationalize oil. 96 deputies showed up, including several who had promised the Shah they would stay away. Everyone voted in favor of nationalization. Even deputies who had promised the Shah they would boycott showed up and voted yes. That's how popular nationalization was. This wasn't Mossadegh imposing his will. This was the Majlis, the constitutional institution Iranians had been fighting for since 1906, exercising its authority. And that's precisely why Britain couldn't accept it. Britain refused to negotiate. Sir William Fraser, the chairman of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, put it simply: there will be no further concessions. When negotiation failed, Britain turned to covert action. But they had a problem. Britain couldn't overthrow Mossadegh alone. They needed American help. And in 1952, President Truman wasn't interested in coups. Then Eisenhower won the 1952 election. And the British found a way to get American support. Christopher Woodhouse was the MI6 officer who helped plan the operation. This is how he described their strategy. "I decided to emphasize the communist threat to Iran, rather than the need to recover control of the oil industry." The British reframed the issue. This wasn't about oil anymore, this was about communism. And the causal chain matters. Britain couldn't overthrow Mossadegh alone. They needed American power. And the only way to get American power was to make Iran about the Cold War, not about oil. Consequently, a 69-year-old constitutional nationalist became, in American eyes, a communist threat. This is how the coup actually worked, not the narrative, the mechanism. The operation had two names. The British called it Operation Boot, the Americans called it TPA Jax. The CIA budgeted $150,000 for propaganda alone, plus additional funds for bribing members of the Majlis. They bribed newspapers to print anti-Mossadegh stories. They paid clerics to preach against communist influence. They purchased deputies for a non-confidence vote. They organized street mobs with paid demonstrators. And when the moment was right, military units would complete the overthrow. But the part that most people miss is this. The CIA didn't just organize a coup. They manufactured the communist threat they claimed to be fighting against. Iran did have a communist party, the Tudeh, but the Tudeh wasn't allied with Mossadegh. The CIA decided to make it look like they were. Black propaganda means fake materials designed to look like they came from the enemy. The CIA printed fake Tudeh leaflets, threatening religious leaders with savage punishment if they opposed Mossadegh, to create the appearance of a communist threat, to justify removing him. August 15, 1953, the first coup attempt. The plan was for the Shah to sign a decree dismissing Mossadegh and appointing General Fazlollah Zahedi, a military officer the British and Americans had chosen, as the new prime minister. Military units would then arrest Mossadegh. But someone in the plot leaked the plan. Mossadegh found out. He arrested the officer who came to deliver the decree. The coup had failed. The Shah fled to Rome. Washington sent a cable ordering the operation discontinued. In view foregoing and in absence strong contrary recommendations from you and Ambassador Henderson, operations against Mossadegh should be discontinued. Kermit Roosevelt, the CIA officer running the operation in Tehran, ignored the order. August 19th, Roosevelt organized paid mobs to flood the streets, creating chaos and the appearance of popular opposition to Mossadegh. Military units that had been paid off moved on Mossadegh's house. Richard Cottam, who was on CIA staff, later admitted what those crowds actually were. That mob that came into North Tehran and was decisive in the overthrow was a mercenary mob. It had no ideology, and that mob was paid with American dollars. By evening, Mossadegh was under arrest, Zahedi was prime minister, and the Shah returned from Rome. The CIA's own internal history, declassified in 2013, states it plainly. The military coup that overthrew Mossadegh and his National Front cabinet was carried out under CIA direction as an act of US foreign policy, conceived and approved at the highest level of government. At his trial, Mossadegh said, "My only crime is that I nationalized the Iranian oil industry and removed from this land the network of colonialism and the political and economic influence of the greatest empire on earth." He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, then house arrest for life. He died in 1967, still under house arrest. The government didn't permit the public funeral. Iran's second democracy crushed. Now, if you've been following the evidence, you might think the America's fault narrative sounds pretty accurate. The CIA did overthrow a democratic government. The documents prove it, and the CIA admitted it. And the trauma this created is real. After 1953, Iranian politics became saturated with conspiracy thinking. Political polemics in Iran are replete with such terms as toteach, jasus, khinyat. These words became central to how Iranians talked about politics. Every event got explained as foreign conspiracy. Every politician got suspected of being a foreign agent. This vocabulary treats Iranian politics as a puppet show, in which the real players are hidden hands. The belief that real decisions are made by foreign powers operating behind the scenes. That's the psychological legacy of 1953. Every regime since then has used the coup as justification. Every failure gets blamed on foreign conspiracies. So, where does this narrative go wrong? The coup was foreign planned, but it was Iranian executed. The events were steered, executed, and operationalized by Iranians, who were directly and indirectly carrying out modified British-US plans. Mossadegh and his colleagues made a number of key strategic and tactical mistakes. Most importantly, they failed to create an organization capable of mobilizing broad support for their movement. Foreign powers provided the plan and the money. Iranians provided the execution. And Mossadegh made mistakes. He held referendums with separate ballot boxes for yes and no. Anyone could see how you voted. That's not real democracy. He took emergency powers that alienated former allies. He knew General Zahedi was plotting against him, but didn't act decisively. Does this justify the coup? No, but it explains why the coup succeeded. The CIA didn't overthrow a unified government. They exploited divisions that already existed. And the deeper problem is treating 1953 as the beginning. As we've seen, the pattern started in 1907. The 1953 coup wasn't a rupture in Iranian history. It was a repetition. The same pattern, different players. And treating 1953 as the original sin means waiting for America to fix what America broke. That's not a political program, that's learned helplessness. So this is what the evidence actually shows. The 1953 coup wasn't unique. It was the second verse of a song started in 1906. But what makes this a cycle, not just repetition, is what happened next. Each suppression radicalized the next generation. The trauma of 1953 shaped everything that came after. In 1979, Iranians rose up again. Millions in the street. They overthrew the Shah. They promised democracy. And then something strange happened. The revolution that promised freedom created a new system of control, one that would prove even harder to challenge than the Shah's. How did that happen, and what does it mean that Iranians are still fighting the same fight 120 years later? That is part 2.